The air was charged with a sense of urgency as passengers moved through the gates at Los Angeles International Airport. Flight 317 to Tokyo Narita was set to depart in an hour, and the first-class passengers were beginning to gather. Among them was Oliver Bennett, a man who wore his ego like a tailored suit. Oliver was used to standing out. His company, a flashy software startup, had recently hit its first billion-dollar valuation. His social media feed was a parade of self-congratulatory posts. "Disruption is my middle name," his latest caption read, beneath a photo of him holding a glass of champagne. "Mr. Bennett, welcome aboard." The flight attendant greeted him warmly, though the forced smile hinted she knew the type. Oliver nodded curtly and stepped into the plush first-class cabin, where each seat resembled a private pod, complete with reclining features and a personal screen. Seat 2A, his home for the next 12 hours. He removed his blazer with a flourish, letting it drape over his seat, and retrieved a set of noise-canceling headphones. A glance at the seat assignment beside him showed it was still vacant. Good. Maybe I'll get some peace for once. Moments later, a figure appeared, slipping into 2B. The man's attire, a plain hoodie and well-worn sneakers, was a stark contrast to Oliver's sharp, tailored ensemble. His face was shadowed by a baseball cap, and he moved with the quiet ease of someone accustomed to blending in. Oliver barely glanced up, typing away on his laptop as the man settled into his seat. "Evening," the man offered casually. "Yeah, sure," Oliver muttered without looking. He was too engrossed in drafting yet another tweet to his 500,000 followers. As the cabin door closed and the engines roared to life, Oliver felt a twinge of curiosity. Something about the man seemed oddly familiar, but he couldn't place it. Probably just another tech guy trying to live the dream, he thought dismissively, leaning back in his seat. The flight attendant walked by, offering champagne. The man declined, opting instead for a bottle of water. Oliver smirked to himself. Water? Really? Might as well be in coach. He whispered loud enough for the man to hear. But the man said nothing, simply offering a faint smile. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Oliver's natural need to dominate any room or cabin kicked in. He finished his champagne in one gulp, placed the glass on the tray with a clink, and turned toward the man in 2B. "So, what do you do?" Oliver asked, his tone dripping with the kind of interest that wasn't genuine. The man turned slightly, his face still obscured by the cap. "I'm in tech," he replied simply. Oliver grinned. "Ah, same here. Bet we've got some war stories to share." He leaned back and crossed his legs, ready to steer the conversation toward his favorite topic, himself. But the man didn't bite. He only nodded lightly and went back to scrolling through his phone. Oliver wasn't used to being ignored. His curiosity morphed into irritation. "You know," he began, his voice raised just enough to catch the attention of nearby passengers. "The tech world is full of people who get way too much credit for half-baked ideas. Take Elon Musk, for example. Everyone's so busy calling him a genius, they forget how reckless he is." The man in 2B paused, his finger hovering over the phone screen, but he didn't look up. Encouraged by the lack of response, Oliver continued. "SpaceX? Sure, it's impressive if you like throwing billions at exploding rockets. Tesla? Overrated. And don't even get me started on Twitter. That whole takeover? A disaster." A faint chuckle escaped from the man in 2B. It was almost imperceptible, but it lit a fire in Oliver. He leaned forward, ready to hammer his point home. "You think I'm wrong?" Oliver challenged. "No," the man said, his voice calm, almost amused. "I think you're passionate." Oliver frowned, unsure if it was a compliment or an insult. "Passionate? I call it realistic. People like Musk, they just ride the wave of hype. Nothing more. A few passengers glanced over now, subtly listening in. Oliver thrived under the attention, mistaking it for admiration. The man in 2B, however, seemed entirely unbothered. "Well?" the man said finally, looking up slightly though his cap still shielded much of his face. "Everyone's entitled to their opinion." Oliver rolled his eyes, taking the comment as a dismissal. "Yeah, but facts are facts. Musk is a walking PR stunt. People like me, real innovators, we're the ones building the future, not blowing hot air." The man offered a polite smile and went back to his phone. Oliver leaned back, grinning to himself. Another clueless wannabe, he thought. Little did he know, the calm demeanor of his seatmate was not ignorance. It was restraint. The hum of the engines filled the cabin as the first-class passengers settled into their routines. Reading, watching movies, or sipping cocktails. But Oliver was far from relaxed. His annoyance festered as the man in 2B remained quiet, offering only the occasional smirk or short reply to his increasingly pointed remarks. "Let me guess," Oliver said, unable to help himself. "You're one of those startup guys. Something in crypto or AI, right? Everyone's jumping on those bandwagons these days." The man looked up briefly, his expression unreadable. "Not exactly." The ambiguity only fueled Oliver's irritation. He thrived on being the center of attention, and 2B's lack of engagement was an affront to his ego. "What's your take on Musk, then?" Oliver asked, his voice sharper now. "I mean, if you're in tech, you must have an opinion." The man hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. "He's done some interesting things." Interesting things? Oliver repeated, laughing. "That's the understatement of the century. The guy's a walking contradiction, preaching about saving the planet while flying private jets, hyping up the future of Mars while barely addressing problems here on Earth." For the first time, a flicker of something crossed the man's face. Amusement, perhaps, or mild irritation, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Maybe he's just doing what he thinks is best," the man replied simply, his tone neutral. "Ha! What does he thinks is best?" Oliver scoffed, spoken like someone who's never actually dealt with real-world consequences. "It's all theory until you're the one footing the bill." The flight attendant arrived with their dinner orders, interrupting the tension. The man in 2B ordered a simple vegetarian meal, while Oliver chose the steak medium rare. As the plates were placed before them, Oliver noticed how calmly the man ate, as though he had all the time in the world. "Must be nice," Oliver muttered under his breath. "Not having a care in the world." The man glanced at him but said nothing, focusing instead on his meal. As the hours passed, Oliver's curiosity about his seatmate grew. There was a quiet confidence about the man, a kind of understated presence that Oliver couldn't quite figure out. He didn't seem intimidated by Oliver's loud critiques or his obvious attempts to bait him into an argument. And then there were the whispers. The flight attendants who passed by seemed to glance at 2B with a mix of curiosity and respect. One even addressed him softly. "Let me know if you need anything, sir." Oliver noticed this and frowned. "Who is this guy?" He leaned forward, pretending to adjust his seat. The man's face was still partially obscured by the baseball cap, but something about his jawline, the way he carried himself, nagged at Oliver. As the cabin lights dimmed and the passengers around them settled in for the long haul, Oliver decided to let it go. Just some eccentric rich guy, he thought. Nothing more. He put on his headphones and reclined his seat, missing the subtle glance his seatmate gave him. A look that hinted at something far beyond what Oliver could imagine. The hours passed, and the cabin remained quiet except for the occasional clinking of glasses and the rustle of blankets. Oliver, now several drinks into his flight, was feeling loose and emboldened. He leaned back, scanning the cabin for any new distractions. His gaze landed once again on the man in 2B. "All right," Oliver said, breaking the silence between them. "I give up. You've got to tell me. What's your deal? You've been sitting there all calm and mysterious. Let me guess. You're some venture capitalist or an eccentric trust fund kid?" The man chuckled softly, his eyes not leaving the page of the book he just opened. "Close," he replied, though he offered no elaboration. "Come on," Oliver pushed, his voice carrying a hint of challenge. "You can't just sit here like some enigma and not spill a little." The man finally looked up, meeting Oliver's gaze directly for the first time. His eyes were sharp, observant, and suddenly very familiar. But before Oliver could piece it together, a flight attendant approached their row with an air of formality. "Excuse me, Mr. Musk," she said, her voice respectful but professional. "The captain wanted me to let you know that your connection in Tokyo is confirmed, and they'll be ready for you upon landing." Oliver froze. The words didn't register at first, as if his brain needed a moment to process. "Mr. Musk?" The man in 2B offered the flight attendant a polite nod. "Thank you," he said, his tone warm but understated. The pieces clicked into place with a jarring finality. The hoodie, the unassuming demeanor, the quiet confidence. It wasn't just anyone sitting next to him. It was Elon Musk. Oliver's mouth went dry. His heart thudded in his chest as he replayed the last few hours in his mind. Every insult, every critique, every mocking jab. It had all been directed at the very man he thought was an untouchable public figure, miles away from his life. For the first time on the flight, Oliver was utterly speechless. Elon Musk adjusted his cap slightly and turned back to his book, as if nothing had happened. But Oliver's discomfort was palpable. His bravado, so robust earlier, now crumbled under the weight of sheer humiliation. The surrounding passengers, who had been pretending not to eavesdrop, now exchanged subtle glances, their expressions a mix of amusement and second-hand embarrassment. Oliver cleared his throat, desperate to regain composure. "So, you're Elon Musk?" Elon closed his book and placed it gently on his tray table. "That's what they tell me," he said, his tone light but edged with humor. Oliver's face flushed crimson. I didn't mean anything by what I said earlier. Just, talking. You can't take these things personally." Elon tilted his head slightly, studying Oliver with an expression that was impossible to read. Then, with a small smile, he said, "Don't worry, I don't." The tension in the cabin was thick enough to cut with a knife. Oliver fumbled for his drink, taking a long sip in a vain attempt to steady his nerves. Elon, on the other hand, seemed utterly unfazed, exuding a calm that only heightened Oliver's discomfort. "So," Oliver started, trying to claw his way out of the hole he dug, "you're probably used to people criticizing you, right? Comes with the territory." Elon leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "I suppose. But I've always believed criticism is useful, as long as it's constructive." He glanced at Oliver, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "Was yours constructive?" Oliver's face burned. "Well, I mean, I didn't know I was talking to you, obviously." Elon's smile widened just slightly, but his tone remained measured. "Does it matter who you're talking to? If the points are valid, they stand regardless of the audience." The response left Oliver momentarily stunned. For all his bravado, he had no comeback. Elon, however, wasn't done. "You mentioned Tesla," Elon said, his voice calm but deliberate. "Do you know how many lives have been saved by our driver assistance technology? How many people avoided accidents because of features we've implemented?" Oliver shifted in his seat, suddenly feeling very small. I guess I didn't look at it that way. And SpaceX, Elon continued, his gaze unwavering. You called it reckless, but did you know our rockets have reduced the cost of access to space by over 90%? That we're developing technologies that could one day protect humanity from extinction-level events. Oliver opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. The weight of Elon's words hung in the air. And as for Twitter, Elon said, his tone softening slightly, yes, it's chaotic, but sometimes chaos is necessary for change. Ideas evolve through friction. Without it, there's no progress. The entire first-class cabin seemed to hold its breath. Elon's words weren't angry or defensive. They were simply factual, delivered with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need to prove anything. Oliver swallowed hard. Look, I didn't mean to. I didn't think you'd be here. Elon leaned forward slightly, his expression gentle but firm. The truth doesn't change based on who's listening. Maybe next time, consider that before you speak. It wasn't said harshly, but it hit Oliver harder than any insult ever could. He sat back in his seat, suddenly feeling very small in the vast expanse of the first-class cabin. For the remainder of the flight, Oliver was uncharacteristically quiet. His mind churned as he replayed every word he'd said. Every smug comment and every insult aimed directly at the man sitting inches from him. He felt a mix of embarrassment, regret, and a strange sense of respect. Meanwhile, Elon returned to his book, as if the confrontation had been nothing more than a fleeting conversation. Occasionally, a flight attendant would approach him with quiet professionalism, offering subtle gestures of deference that now made perfect sense to Oliver. The humbling moment weighed on Oliver like a stone in his chest. This wasn't just about being caught in a moment of arrogance. It was about realizing how little he truly understood the people and ideas he so casually dismissed. As the cabin lights dimmed and most passengers drifted off to sleep, Oliver leaned over hesitantly. "Hey, Mr. Musk," he whispered, his voice low enough not to disturb the quiet cabin. Elon looked up, his expression neutral but attentive. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry," Oliver said, his words heavy with sincerity. "I was out of line. It's easy to criticize from the sidelines, but I can't imagine the weight of doing what you do." Elon studied him for a moment, then nodded slightly. "Apology accepted," he said simply. "It's not easy, but that's the nature of progress. You're always going to face resistance, especially from people who don't see the full picture. The key is to keep moving forward." Oliver nodded, his throat tight. For once, he had nothing clever to say. As the plane began its descent into Tokyo, the cabin came alive with the sound of passengers stirring and preparing for arrival. Oliver stared out the window, watching the city lights grow brighter as the plane approached the runway. He thought about all the times he dismissed people like Elon Musk, visionaries who dared to think bigger, risk more, and tackle problems most wouldn't even attempt. In his quest to seem knowledgeable, he'd ignored the courage it took to face constant criticism while pursuing something meaningful. As they disembarked, Elon turned to Oliver one last time. "Good luck with your work," he said, offering a small smile. "I hope it's something that makes a difference." Oliver watched as Elon disappeared into the crowd, flanked by discreet airport personnel who whisked him away toward his next endeavor. For the first time in years, Oliver felt something unfamiliar: humility. He wasn't sure what he'd do with this newfound perspective, but he knew one thing. He couldn't go back to being the man he was when he boarded that plane. The lesson was clear. It's easy to criticize from the sidelines, but the real challenge lies in stepping up, understanding, and creating change.